The most powerful leader of the Sicilian Mafia and one of the most influential crime lords in the world just recently passed away. But how did he die? And who will take over his criminal empire? We hope to provide some answers in this rundown of the life and death of the world's most infamous mob boss, Matteo Messina Denaro. Denaro was born in Castelvetrano, Sicily in 1962. Organized crime ran in Denaro's family. He was the son of mafia boss named Francesco Messina Denaro, also known as Don Ciccio. His grandfather and siblings were also members of the mafia. Matteo therefore found himself surrounded by crime from just an early age, learning to use a gun at just 14 years old. Violence followed soon after, and Matteo reportedly committed his first murder when he was still a teenager. His father started as an armed guard for a family of wealthy landowners and was later rewarded with territory for his work, beginning the family's rise to power. As for Matteo, he began working for his father and the family. Much of this work involved violence, and Matteo soon built a reputation as a brutal killer.
Denaro, who fronted the notorious Sicilian Costa Nostra group and nicknamed himself the Devil, once boasted to have murdered enough people to fill a cemetery.
In 1989, a bloody struggle broke out between two rival mafia clans, granting Matteo an opportunity to prove himself. He was accused the same year of murdering hotel owner Nicola Gonzalez. Apparently, he complained about the local mafia presence to one of his employees, who turned out to be Matteo's lover. An arrest warrant was later issued against him for a quadruple murder that occurred the same year. Several other high-profile murders occurred in the early 90s that were linked to Denaro. He was accused of killing rival mafia boss Vincenzo Milazzo and strangling his pregnant girlfriend to death in 1992. All this violence triggered an increased legal presence and harsh prison treatment for suspected mobsters, and some former mafia members began testifying against their old colleagues. This only created another opportunity for violence for Matteo, who kidnapped the son of a man who was testifying against him. In one of the most infamous criminal acts of his lifetime, Denaro held the 12-year-old Giuseppe Di Matteo for around 2 years before murdering him and dissolving his body in acid so it couldn't be buried. Judges such as Giovanni Falcone began to crack down on mafia activity, fighting back against the bloodshed and corruption that had infected the Italian legal system. The Sicilian Mafia responded once again with violence, launching a bombing campaign in Sicily and the Italian mainland targeting anti-mafia magistrates and their affiliates.
First, the bombing of anti-mafia judge Giovanni Falcone, his wife and 3 bodyguards. The crater left by the bomb on the Palermo Airport Road was 100 meters in diameter.
Falcone was possibly the mafia's biggest target. The famous judge spent most of his professional life fighting against organized crime, and in 1992, Denaro was sent as part of a group to Rome to kill him. Denaro and his fellow hitmen were recalled before they committed the murder, but Falcone was later assassinated by a car bomb in May of 1992.
He was sentenced, as you said, to a life term for his role in the murders of Falcone and Borsellino, 2 anti-mafia prosecutors who eventually became the symbol of the fight of the state against the organized crime.
The head of the Sicilian Mafia at the time, Salvatore Riina, was arrested in 1993, but Denaro continued the strategy of terrorism, helping to organize bombings all across Italy the same year. Other influential magistrates and many civilians were killed during this time by bombings organized by Denaro. It is unknown exactly how many people he killed throughout his long career, but the figure is certainly high enough to earn a lifetime behind bars. Many people had now testified against Denaro, and in November 1993, he was found in court to be one of the organizers of the kidnapping of Giuseppe Di Matteo. Implicated in a huge number of crimes and facing life behind bars, Denaro disappeared from public view in 1993, beginning 30 years on the run. More testimony from former mobsters in 1994 and 1996 linked him to even more crimes, making a return to the public eye impossible.
The Ruthless Killer's last confirmed sighting was in August 1993 when he was spotted with 2 friends holidaying in Forte dei Marmi in the northern Italian region of Tuscany.
Matteo's father died naturally in 1998, passing much of his responsibilities on to his son. At the age of 36, he became capomandamento of his hometown of Castelvetrano and several neighboring cities. His power increased once more in 2001 when another capomandamento named Vincenzo Virga was arrested. After his arrest, Matteo took over his territory, which included the important city of Trapani and its surroundings. Now in charge of extensive territory and manpower, Matteo was able to make important changes to the mafia that would allow him to further grow his power and reputation. The traditional mafia in Sicily is known as Cosa Nostra, meaning our thing, but Matteo began to separate some of his new territory from the traditional mafia and became more independent. Matteo had become the leader of a large amount of territory and therefore a large amount of business. He earned most of his money from the classic mafia money-making rackets, extortion, protection, gambling, and drug trafficking. The family also owned numerous enterprises that operated above the law, including a Sicilian supermarket chain and olive groves. However, it is likely that these businesses came in handy when money needed to be laundered, and many aspects of their administration fell somewhere between legal and illegal. With the drug trade continuing to grow, it is likely that Matteo and his family were earning huge sums of money from their involvement. His activity in the international drug trade gained him attention from the FBI after he was said to be involved in the Cuntrera Caruana, the most powerful drug trading mafia clan in the 80s and 90s. He was also believed to have connections in Venezuela and Colombia at the time, who were supplying much of Europe's illegal narcotics. In a relatively short amount of time, Matteo had built his family's independence, wealth, and power, becoming one of the strongest mafia leaders in Sicily. In 2000, he was tried in absentia and sentenced to life imprisonment for his terrible crimes. He was considered to be one of the most wanted men in the world, but remained out of sight until his arrest this year. In the mid-2000s, the arrest of several high-profile leaders meant that Denaro gained power once more. He was now one of the most powerful mob bosses in Sicily, painting an even larger target on his back for prosecutors. As well as his reputation as a ruthless killer, Denaro was also portrayed in the Italian media as a playboy and womanizer, often seen wearing designer clothing from Armani and Versace, and driving a Porsche. Denaro seemed to enjoy a luxury lifestyle. He also moved away from the mafia's traditional approach, reportedly playing video games and sleeping around. He is even said to have had a child outside of marriage, which is unusual in the conservative culture of the Sicilian Mafia. During his time underground, Denaro was allegedly spotted in Brazil, Spain, the UK, and Austria. He continued to oversee operations in his controlled territories while remaining under the radar. The same can't be said for his associates, however, as his lover was arrested and sentenced to 3 years in prison for aiding and abetting in 2001. Denaro's sister Patrizia was arrested and sentenced to 14 years behind bars in 2013, but still Matteo remained a ghost. In 2017, after almost 25 years on the run, Denaro became the unchallenged boss of all bosses within the Sicilian Mafia. Senior Mafia bosses Salvatore Rina and Bernardo Provenzano died in 2016 and 2017, meaning that Denaro inherited much of their power. He had allegedly been nominated by Bernardo and his successor, a controversial move at the time that was met with frustration by some senior mobsters. Denaro was now the most powerful mafia boss on Earth, having carried out criminal activities well beyond his original territorial borders and amassed massive wealth and influence. Despite his massive gains, he lacked the level of control of a traditional mafia head such as his predecessor Salvatore Rina. Prosecutor Antonio Ingroia described this new system under Denaro as more of a federation and less of an authoritarian state. Denaro's time at the top didn't last as long as his lengthy rise to power. Once again, the Italian police created problems for him. In 2008, Italian authorities began a new strategy to take down the mafia. Instead of arresting members, they instead focused on the money, seizing 700 million euros in assets from Denaro's supermarket business. 133 land holdings were also seized, which could all be traced back to Denaro. He had been using his legitimate supermarket business to launder money for decades, and the seizures was considered to be a major victory for police. In 2010, the onslaught continued, with police seizing 550 million euros worth of companies, properties, and vehicles traceable to the mafia. This strategy was continued for several years, with police seizing billions in assets. Chief Prosecutor Francesco Messineo said that their aim was to dry up the water in which Denaro swims.
In 2017, the net tightened as 200 officers searched caverns and bunkers around Castelvetrano, believing he was living in a bin Laden-esque fugitive lifestyle below ground.
The police felt as though they were closing in on Denaro, but failed to arrest him despite numerous attempts and the allocation of huge amounts of resources. Denaro remained lost for another 13 years until he was finally arrested in January 2023, 30 years after his original disappearance.
A patient like no other, escorted out of this private Palermo hospital, his cancer treatment now interrupted because the elderly man in the beanie cap had in fact been Italy's most wanted mafia boss for 3 decades.
He was detained at a private clinic in Palermo, Sicily while receiving treatment for colon cancer. Despite the campaign to dry up Denato's funds, his assets were estimated to be worth 4 billion euros at the time of his arrest.
This morning, Italians are glued to the news because everyone's trying to understand how it was possible for this man to escape for so long.
People cheered on the streets of Palermo as the man who had been responsible for so much violence and bloodshed was finally captured after decades on the run. 8 months after his arrest, Denaro died after falling into a coma on the 24th of September, 2023.
The 61-year-old, who is known as the boss of bosses and was responsible for heinous crimes that shocked Italy and the world, had been suffering from cancer. As Messina Denaro's health deteriorated in recent weeks, he was transferred from his maximum security prison to hospital where he died.
3 of the Sicilian Mafia's top bosses have passed away in less than a decade, leaving a potential power vacuum behind them. The organization's leadership structure has been disrupted since the 90s, with some arguing that Denaro did not have the power of a supreme leader that has traditionally been in charge. If this is true, the Sicilian Mafia could be heading towards disarray and decentralization because of Denaro's death. Alternatively, some people believe that his demise has opened up opportunity for the Mafia to select a new superboss, heading back towards the traditional system of a singular authoritarian leader that existed before Denaro's rise to power. Potential heirs to Denaro's empire include 85-year-old Settimo Mineo. Currently serving a lengthy prison sentence, it wouldn't be the first time that a mob boss would be required to run their businesses from behind bars. Another option is former hitman Giovanni Mottisi, known as the Fat Man. He's been the boss of a lot of businesses in Palermo for some time and has been on the run since 1998 after being found guilty of murder. Could it be that the recent changes to the Mafia's organization might point to the beginning of the end of the Sicilian crime organization? The Mafia has reportedly been struggling for years, with much of its lucrative drug market falling into the hands of the 'Ndrangheta, crime organization based in Calabria.
Denaro's arrest may be the final blow for the Sicilian Mafia, said by many to have been replaced by the Calabrian 'Ndrangheta as the most powerful organized crime syndicate in Italy.
The Mafia still controls much of the organized crime in Sicily, but some believe that Denaro may have been the last godfather. Will his death bring the end of the Sicilian Mafia once and for all, or an opportunity for an equally ruthless criminal to take control? Only time will tell. Thanks for watching today's video. Be sure to subscribe for more.